Good evening, everyone. My name is Paris Bateman, and I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. I am the chair of the Connection and Social Action Committee, and I would like to welcome everyone to the webinar tonight. We are excited to have you all, and we thank you for joining us to learn more about your voting rights and what it means to be a voter. We have planned a very informative webinar for you all, and we sincerely hope that you leave tonight excited to vote and are aware of all the rights you have as a citizen. If anyone has any questions throughout the night, please feel free to leave them in the chat. We will be checking the chat periodically, and we will be able to answer those questions. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our president, the Honorable Zena Cruz.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As you heard Paris say, we are so excited about this opportunity. Alpha Kappa Alpha leads when it comes to voting. We take voting as a serious matter. And on the global level, internationally, regionally, locally, our connection and social action committees are revved up to get out the vote, to let the community know you have rights. This is the education that you need. And so this is just part of that process. As you heard Paris say, please, we're also live on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, go ahead and add any questions to the Facebook comment section, and we're also going to keep an eye on the chat. Tonight, I'm so excited that we have our special guests and that they have taken out the time this evening to join us. And at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Marshawn Warren. This is probably really near and dear to her heart. She is an educator and works with the high school in Belleville. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her as she introduces our first speaker.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, President Cruz, for that wonderful introduction. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker for the evening. So Christopher Belt is a lifelong resident of the Metro East. Christopher holds a BS in history from Illinois State University, a master's in public administration from SIUE, and a master's in professional counseling from Lindenwood Belleville. Christopher is married to his wife of 26 years and counting, Stephanie Scurlock Belt. My apologies, Dr. Stephanie Scurlock Belt. They have two children, a 25-year-old daughter, Christiana Yvonne Belt, and a 22-year-old son, Stephen Christopher Belt, who is a junior at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. Christopher is an accomplished author of a children's book titled The Adventures of Nate the Nate. He is immediate past chair of the Senate Black Caucus. He is currently the Senate chair of the Education K-12 and sub-chair of Appropriations for Education K-12. Belt is a former law enforcement and corrections official, as well as a former school board president of the Cahokia United School District 187. Again, without further ado, Senator Belt, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation, and I'm looking forward to the questions that in answer period. I know we'll get some really good questions. So you want me to go right ahead?
Yeah, you go right ahead.
Okay. So I'm here to talk about the importance of voting. Why should we vote? And to do that, I would like to start with a historical context. That's the history part of it, the history major part of it, and then proceed, and then I'll wrap it up. Why should we vote? In a nutshell, we should vote because I feel that it's our moral obligation. I think we have an obligation, and we live in America. Voting is the cornerstone of our democracy, and a lot of people have died for the right to the ballot. As the Constitution, which is, as we know, the supreme law of the land, was originally written, everyone didn't have the right to vote. Ideally, historically, white males, landowners, had the right to vote. And then comes this thing, the Civil War broke out. And after the Civil War, roughly around 1869, Black men got the right to vote. But that came with a set of rules or caveats to it. You just couldn't vote, particularly in the South. There was things such as poll tax. And what is a poll tax? A poll tax is really you had to pay to vote, right? You had to, they put a tax on voting, understanding that a lot of, or mainly most of African Americans didn't have any money to vote. And so that poll tax was really impactful. There were literacy tests, understanding that the vast majority of African Americans were illiterate. They could not read, right? And so all these things were put into place, again, to circumvent the right to vote, to usurp African Americans at that time their right to vote. So you moving on, and you're looking at African Americans in 1869. Then you get to 1920. Women, finally got the right to vote. Suffrage movements and all the fighting that they had to do to get the right to vote. And even then, it was a lot of other things put in place, barriers put in place. And so all of these things really came to an head with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And it really straightened things out so that you could vote. And that's only 57 years ago. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 ended all those policies that put up barriers to people to vote. And so it really is, as I stated before, it really is a linchpin of American society now. You can vote your voice, your conscience, vote on those things that are important to you. A lot of people tell me all the time when I'm on and I do these type of forums, they'll say, well, my vote doesn't matter, or why should I vote? Because you want your voice to matter. If you don't vote, then you're leaving it up to someone else to speak for you. In the Gore-Bush election for the presidency in 2000, Al Gore got the popular vote, but he lost the electoral vote. And Al Gore lost Florida by 537 votes. Let me underscore that. He lost Florida by 537 votes. So if you think your vote doesn't matter, it matters. It literally comes down to a vote. And no matter what political ideology you align yourself with, in this case, if 538 people had voted differently, you would have had a different president. And so it really does matter. What can you do? And an interesting fact also too is that as soon as you get 18, you can vote. Or if you're turning 18 by the time of an election, right, you can vote. There was a time prior to 1971, you had to be 21 years of age to vote in this country, right? But the idea is, if I'm old enough to go to war, if I'm old enough to fight for this country at 18, then I certainly should have the right to vote or cast my voice in an election. And so those are some of the things that you do have to understand that this is an American, a thing that's really valued in America. Everyone doesn't have the right to vote. There are people in other countries that they just would literally die for the opportunity to vote. And no matter if it's a federal election, a presidential election, no matter if it's a midterm, whether it's local, you should exercise your right to the ballot and let your opinions be heard. And how do you do that? How do you lead up to that? You really should understand who your candidates are, what the issues are. Most people have access to a cell phone. You can pull up any number of newspapers, any number of independent sites that you trust, to get an opinion on what's going on, to read something that aligns with your philosophy, to really understand what's going on, and really get to know the candidates, really get to know those items or those issues that are pervasive in any election, and really have your voice on that. What else could you do? Say you're 17, you're 16, you're underage, and you won't be of age by the time an election roll around. What can you do? You can still volunteer. You can still work phone banks. You can still canvass, which basically means knocking on doors. You can still be a part of it, of the political process, because it really is a beautiful process. It's flawed, just like most things, but we cannot let perfect be the enemy of good, right? We constantly are in search of perfect, but make no mistake about it, we're in a good situation with the way our elections are ran, and the fact that all you have to be primarily is 18 years old in this state. Some of the issues that you would see often on a ballot would probably be, just look at what we have going on now. Again, this is nonpartisan conversation, but the hot topic right now is women's reproductive rights. You have, what else do you have? We have high inflation. We have a lot of things that are going on right now in this country and in this world, that you should vote your conscience, vote your voice, and really have a say so in this. I think the moment I turned 18, I've been voting, and I've been voting since I was 18, whether it's local, whether it's midterms, whether it's a federal. I've been voting, and my family has as well. Again, I cannot underscore that a lot of people have paid the ultimate price for the right to express their opinion, the right to have their voices heard, and so I think it is a moral obligation that we have as citizens in the United States to vote.
Senator, let me ask you a question. What committees do you work on in the Senate?
I'm the chair of education, K through 12. I am on crim law. I am on license activities. I am on insurance. I am on public utilities. So I'm on quite a few.
All right. And considering we're really trying to urge our young voters, those who may still be in high school or just gotten out of high school, really trying to encourage them to register and be an integral part of this process. Can you tell me what is the most impactful legislation, say in this past assembly or the past few assemblies, as it relates to any education bills or any education initiatives?
That I've personally passed?
Yes.
Okay. Madam President, it's all of it's important to me. It's like asking me which kid do I like best, and okay. you get down and they're different. My bills are different. My children are different.
Right.
But they're all they're all special in their own unique way. And so I will highlight some of the bills that we have passed on education. Uh, I passed a bill, and I'm real fuzzy with bill numbers because we go through so many bills. But I passed a bill that allows that's law now in education that says um, any all school districts, they must have a wellness plan, and that wellness plan must include a plan for food, the breakfast and the lunch that school district serves. Most school districts throw their food away at the end of the day. What we've known and what COVID has revealed, primarily, is that a lot of people, they come to school to eat, right? And so if you want me to be my best, and it's my job as the chair of the Education Committee for the Senate to create environments that are optimal, conducive environments for optimal learning for kids, for our students. Well, how can you do that if you're hungry? And so what this bill says is, in that wellness plan, you must lay out your plan for children, for students who are hungry, to take food home that you otherwise would have thrown away. And so what we know is, if you give me homework and I go home to a situation where there's no food, how can I do it? That's not even the first thing on my mind. I need to eat. If I come to school, I'm and I'm fidgety, and I'm laying my head down, and I'm telling you I'm my stomach hurt. It's probably because in some instances I'm hungry, right? I don't have a behavior problem, though I may get that label, but I'm hungry. And that's the sad reality of it. When COVID came and universities shut down, we found a lot of people were homeless because the dorms closed and they didn't have anywhere to go. We found out that meal plan was all that they had to eat. And we found the same thing out with high school, K through 12. If those schools aren't open, those kids aren't getting breakfast and those kids aren't getting dinner. And food is a fuel. I gotta have fuel, just as if it was a vehicle. I gotta have fuel in my body to do the best job that I can do. And so this allows food to be taken home throughout the week. It allows food to be taken home on the weekend. And I just think that's a win-win situation, because there again, that food would otherwise be thrown away.
Very good. That is a very impactful bill. We often hear people and organizations, when there's an issue, they say, call your senator, sign this letter, sign this petition. So what I want to know is, do you get those calls? Do you get those petitions? And what do you do when you're looking at these petitions and getting these phone calls? How does it affect how you respond or may vote or may weigh in on an issue?
You know what? That's a very good question. I get a lot of those. I get a lot of phone calls. I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of messages on my social media sites. And a lot of my legislation over the last 4 years that was the beginning of that legislation. And people ask me all the time, where do you get your ideas from? My constituents. And we can be dealing with an issue. We can be dealing with an idea that a constituent might have heard or seen somewhere else, and that starts the idea of getting policy. And usually, the anatomy of a bill goes from that idea. I'll send the idea in a narrative, or pick up the phone and call policy staff and explain what the issue is. And then policy will put it in a language and they'll send it back to me. and we'll look at it and they'll say, is this what you really were trying to say? And I'm like, yes or no. If it's no, we tweak it some more. If it's yes, we move it forward, and then it goes to the legislative review board, which is LRB. It's filed, and once it's filed, then it goes to committee. Hopefully it gets assigned out of a committee, and if it's assigned out of committee or to a committee, it'll be assigned to a committee. And once it's assigned, then you know what committee you're going in front of, and then you have to go defend it, right? You go there, you defend your proposal, and if it passes committee, it goes to the floor, right? So in my case, it'll go to the Senate floor, and we'll argue, we'll fight it out on the floor. And if it passes, which if we're in session between January and the last day of May, you only need 30 votes out of 59. It's 59 senators. You multiply that times 2 is 118 representatives. Each Senate district has 2 representatives. But if I get 30 votes, then it goes over to the House, and that whole process starts over again. And so,
Wow.
and then if you're lucky to get it out of both chambers, it goes to the governor, and you hope and pray he puts his signature on it, and then it becomes a public act, or what we call the law.
Great. That's some very good education, even for those of us who are adults, who so many people imagine that legislators all throughout the year are in Springfield or in Washington, D.C. making laws. And you made an interesting point when you said you're in session usually January to May. So is it fair to say that any law that didn't go to the governor when you leave session in May is probably not going to be brought up again until next year? And kind of talk about how veto session in the fall plays into that.
Absolutely. I was just about to say, see, we're going back in October, and that's what we call veto session. Veto session is a time I like to say we kind of tighten up the loose ends, try to get some things done that we weren't able to do in regular session. And so what veto session does is, if there are bills that I mentioned earlier, bills that did not get called, or you didn't get a chance to actually deal with them on the floor, there's a great possibility that you can in veto session, right? And so it's kind of a reprieve for some bills, not all of them, because you're only there for probably 4 days, 3 days. And you're putting like 12, 13, 14 hours a day in at the Capitol building. You get there in the morning, you're there all day, and you're trying to get these things done. But that same process, now, it's outside of the statutory time that we're in session, January through May 31st. So when we go back in October, the threshold of passage raises. It goes from 30 to 36. And so there's and each vote matters, even on the Senate floor. I know we're talking about voting, and it really does. Your vote matters, but it also matters. Each vote matters. When you from 30 to 36, sometimes can seem like 100 miles. Those precious 6 votes sometimes can seem like 30 votes, right? 30 votes, and it gets really, really hard to get all those 6 votes passed. So you really want to try to make sure that your caucus, in my instance, it'll be the Dem caucus, really understand what the issue is, what the proposal is, why the bill would be impactful. And you have to do all that, because, again, just because you're a Democrat, in my instance, doesn't mean that they're going to vote for your bill. We have a supermajority. Out of the 59 senators, we have 41, and it's a supermajority because in essence, we could pass a bill without the other side even joining in. But we always try to get bipartisan support on whatever it is that we do.
Very good. I once again going back to how we're focusing on education, our young people, and you indicated that you're on the education committee, and I want to talk a little bit about lobbyists. Is that who advocates for students? If you didn't think of the bill, for example, the wellness bill, how else could it get to you, the idea of a wellness bill? Do lobbyists and agencies advocate on behalf of our children?
Yes, yes. I mean, you have parents. I'm looking at some language now for dyslexia. I'm looking, and so parents are leading this group, this charge to me. Uh, Oftentimes, you'll have the IEA, which is a teachers type of union. You'll have IFT, Illinois Federations of Teachers. They will often bring legislation forward.
Okay.
Then you have think tanks like Advance Illinois and other things, and real non-for-profits, but they really hone in on the education process. And so that you have a lot of those type of organizations in going forward. Another bill that we passed, it was a House bill, in which means it started in the House. Again, I'm horrible with House bill numbers, Senate bill numbers, but here's what the bill does. And Representative LaToya Greenwood brought the bill forward in the House. I carried it in the Senate. What it says is, no longer in Illinois, if you're an Illinois resident, and no longer in Illinois is the ACT or the SAT the only way to gain admittance to an Illinois college. And see, that's big for me because I was a school board member. I was president of the school board in Cahokia. And what I saw was I had the opportunity to see these brilliant kids. They walked around with 3.8 GPAs on a 4-point schedule. They're really brilliant. But when it came time to taking that test, right, they struggled. And for a whole host of reasons. And what we found is, number one, you do better on that test if you have resources, right? If you're able to pay and get in a Kaplan class or whatever class you're able to take, then you do better on average. But if you don't have the $1,500 to $2,000, $2,200, then you're not able to partake in that process. And what we found and what the trend is, it's not GPA that's an indicator of how well you do in college. It's what you did in high school, right? And so your academic prowess in high school determines whether or not you're going to really do well in college. And so that's big. That bill is law now, and it's big because it opens the door. It opens the door for other of our kids and kids in general to go to college who otherwise they would have had a 3.8 and scored a 15 on the ACT, a 3.8 and scored a 16 on the ACT, a 3.3. And if that score is so powerful that it nullifies what you've done for the last 4 years. And so that's a really big bill in that it really does open the door for college accessibility.
Oh, that's some very good information. That's particularly near and dear to my heart. I have 3 children, and as you indicated, they're all different.
Right.
And I have one child who can skim through some notes and take a standardized test right quick, do great. I have another student who went through the process, another child who went through the prep course twice and did great.
Mm-hmm.
Came time to the actual test, just could not, if there's something about the stressors that may be involved. So it's just, everybody is different. So that is good to know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm listening to all of the information that you are providing, and I'm wondering, do you sleep between January and May? All the meetings you must have to take, all of the phone calls, letters, campaigns. You got to be tired.
It's a lot. It's a labor of love. I say that all the time because when you're in Springfield, now we don't the dates in Springfield go from January 1st to May 31st, right? Now, oftentimes we're not there continuously. We'll do 4 or 5 days a week. You get to come home until the end of May. You get to come home on the weekend. But when you come home, right? So when you're in Springfield, you're dealing with lobbyists, you're dealing with, in some instances, constituents. And you got to understand that you are in the position of a legislator, even though I'm the 57th district, you're employed by the state. And so I get busloads of people from Chicago.
Mhm.
I get busload people from all over the state, and they come to see me. And so you see them, and you deal with lobbyists, and you're in committees all day, and that's Springfield. But then when you come home, you deal with like real life issues, because somebody will be on your phone, or somebody wants to meet with you, and you're looking, they're about to get evicted, or they're looking, their water bill is about to get cut off, and so it's heavier here, right? You're trying to make policy up there to make it it less burdensome within the state. But when you come here, you're dealing with violence. You're dealing with how do we make it better, and you're dealing with all the issues that are prevalent in underserved communities. I mean, we're dealing with potable drinking water and sewer issues in Cahokia Heights. We're dealing with violence. I mean, the 57th district, which encompasses most of St. Clair County and parts of Madison, the Venice Township under the new map is just Venice and Madison. If you were to Google the top 10 poorest cities in Illinois, 3 of them would show up in the 57th district. You'll have East St. Louis, you'll have the old Centerville, and you'll have Brooklyn, which is, by the way, the oldest incorporated African-American city in the United States. No other Senate district in the state of Illinois has that distinction. And so when you have the 3 poorest, right, out of the top 10, and then we know other ones are around, you know, it's a lot of pain, it's a lot of hurt, it's a lot of hopelessness, and so you have to work on that. You got to work at trying to mitigate and remedy those issues, and
Yes.
I think we've done a really good job at trying to do that. I mean, we passed a wage increase bill. One of the first things we did, one of the first votes I think I've had, we raised the minimum wage up from, I think it was $8.25 or something, to it'll be $15 by the end of the cycle. So every January the 1st, it raises up $1, right? Until we get to 15 and we max that out. That's huge, because $8.25 an hour, if you multiply it out, we were paying people a poverty wage. It still fell under what the federal poverty wage line is. And so
Right.
$8.25 times 40 hours a week times 4 weeks, it's times 12, it still fell under. So we were paying people a poverty wage.
Mhm.
You know, how can they make it, right? And I'm a big believer in that. You know, your zip code should not determine the quality of education that you get. Your zip code shouldn't determine the quality healthcare you get. And so these are the type of things that we've been working on, bringing money to the city, into those underserved communities. We're bringing jobs to the 57th district. We're bringing projects to the whole 57th district. And so these are the type of things that you work on.
This is such great information. I'm going to go ahead and give you a moment to rest. But before we transition, I just want to, we deal with 6 high schools primarily in our service area. We have Altoff, we have Belleville East, we have Belleville West, we have Mascoutah, we have O'Fallon, and we have Lebanon. And so you talked about your first vote as a senator, which reminded me to, significant moments in voting. I want these students and these young people to know that it is poignant, it is awe-inspiring, it is impactful when we vote. And there are 2 times I remember weeping when I was casting my vote. One was in 2008. And the other was when I turned 18. We won't talk about what year that was. Let's just say there's some decades. But is there a meaningful voting experience that you've had that you can recall?
You know what? It was my first vote. It was 2008 vote, and it was the first time my whole family, my immediate family, my wife, my son, and my daughter were able to vote together. Right.
Yeah.
Those stick out in my mind because again, when you know the history behind voting, when you know how important your voice is, right? And oftentimes what we find is if the parents vote, the child will vote. And so you put that in there and you go together and you make that vote and you walk out with the little sticker on and you say, hey, we did it, right? That was huge, and that still sticks out to me. And I can pick up the phone right now and we can talk about, if I call either one of those my kids, we can talk about issues and their take is not always my take, but we can talk about issues and we can go back and forth, and it's a great thing.